An American coffee house chain here in South Korea halts an in-house Call My Name service in light of the presidential election, while female voters reportedly face a familiar election campaign reality. Do stay with us. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective. It's Friday, May 30th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sunhee. It's that time of the week during which we delve into a number of stories here that made international headlines, and today they are all related to the election. For more on this, I have Fabian Kretschmer with German news agency DPA here in the studio. Fabian, it's great to have you here.
Nice to be here.
I also have writer Colin Marshall with the pundit's take on today's topic. Colin, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Right, Fabian, we will start with you. So as I mentioned in this short clip ahead of our talk, Starbucks here in South Korea has been making international headlines for a service that it runs that some customers have been using to make political statements. Do tell us more.
Yeah, first I should explain this service. I mean, for viewers who are based in South Korea, I mean, probably they would know because Starbucks is so popular here. It's basically South Korea is the third biggest market for Starbucks. Yeah, so if you go to Starbucks, you order a coffee. Usually you don't get a number, but they make it more personal. You can choose a name that you can also get written on your coffee cup. And for example, the barista would call out your name, or now it's displayed in on an LED display, and you know, people have been making fun names or would use the name of their K-pop singer that they like, and it became kind of a joke. But now during this election campaign, people have been also using political slogans. For example, they would take a candidate name and then make a statement, and some really stark statements. One was, for example, arrest Yoon Suk-yeol, or Lee Jae-myung is a spy. And when those those customers, actually, they made photos of it, they posted it on social media, it went viral, and then, yeah, Starbucks got cold feet, and they said, wow, this is not political neutral, we have to kind of end this. And what they did is they banned customers from using the names of candidates, all the leading candidates. And yeah, ironically, for example, if you share accidentally the same name as one of the leading candidates, then what do? You cannot use your own name. But yeah, that shows you how sensitive it is if you use political statements within a corporate setting.
Right, indeed. Colin, all this being said, do you suppose the practice of political neutrality here in South Korea among corporations or celebrities, do you suppose it's more pronounced?
It's more pronounced than in the United States, where I'm from, certainly. Although in the US, if you think about it, or if you have experience there, typically business owners are assumed to side with the Republican Party, the more conservative party, and celebrities to side with the Democratic Party, the more liberal one. And so there are exceptions, but they'll let you know. You know, there are high-profile figures who, whether they be business owners who are Democratic or celebrities who are Republican, they don't really make a big secret of it. And sometimes they're donors, and people know, and it's part of their image. Here in Korea, I was just reading the new edition of Yoon Hong's book, The Birth of Korean Cool. And she writes about how in Korea, celebrities, there are no celebrity like bad boys. No, if you're rebellious, you're really not in any real sense rebellious. Nobody's famous and actually rebelling against some social norm at the same time in a serious way. And so I think that's part of this whole need to preserve the image in Korea, to preserve not just a politically neutral image, but a sort of broad-based image where you don't want to alienate your audience. And airing a political opinion of any kind, in most cases, is seen to be something that will alienate your audience in a way that could be fatal to your career. Whether that happens at practice or not is another story, but sometimes, as we saw a few months ago with that trot singer who made an instant message comment to someone else saying that he wasn't going to comment publicly on the Yoon Suk-yeol martial law contretemps, he got in trouble for that, for saying privately that he wasn't going to say anything. So when consensus goes a certain way in society, it can be dangerous to be seen as being deliberately silent. And a little bit of that happened with the whole Park Geun-hye protests in 2016 as well. So for the most part, I think celebrities and businesses want to stay on the fence or not really put down a flag on either side. But sometimes when it comes down to it, public sentiment wants you to say something, and then you have to.
Right, and staying with this, Fabian, how do you care to explain South Korea's emphasis on political neutrality for the corporate and celebrity world?
Well, I can try to explain it, but to be honest, I think some aspects are also quite strange to me, which I also don't fully understand. But I would say what contributes to it is that South Korea, in the end, is a polarized society when it comes to political views. I mean, you can debate about it, but in the end, I would say, yeah, it's quite polarized. And secondly, public debates can get heated very easily. And yeah, when, for example, there's an election season, even K-pop stars, when they go out, have some photo shooting, they will also wear neutral colors. They would not want to wear, for example, strong red, strong blue colors that are linked to political parties. And the same goes for corporates. And, you know, for example, companies, it's the same everywhere. They can make political statements, but only with some rationale behind it. And that's always, will it bring profit or not? I mean, I say it a little bit in a cynical way, but I've been seeing in Europe companies making statements or posting rainbow flags and for Pride Month, so basically promoting minority rights. But at the same time, the same company would not do that in, let's say, more conservative Muslim countries. So the point is always, could it scare off customers or not? And I think here both celebrities and companies are very cautious because they might lose basically half of the population if they side with the wrong side. I mean, I'm simplifying, but I think that's basically the point.
Right, something to think about. Meanwhile, Colin, as we end 2 days of early voting today and look ahead to the actual election day on June 3rd, the New York Times published an interesting article about Korea's female voters and the dilemma they face. Could you walk us through the gist of that particular article and then include your thoughts on it?
The idea there is that there's no major candidate in this election catering to women, catering to female voters. And one reason could be, or this is one analysis of that dynamic, is that many women are not inclined to vote for 국민의 힘 with Kim Moon-soo running. And the other party, 더불어민주당, with Lee Jae-myung, is sort of acting as if they've got women's votes in the bag anyway and don't need to compete for them. And so women get a bit lost as a group of voters being appealed to in this election. Now, I do find it a bit bothersome to see women regarded as a single block in politics, because I think, as we know, women anywhere, or Korean women specifically, it's not like they all agree on everything politically. And I think we can see that in just the generational difference alone. You know, is a 65-year-old woman going to agree on politics with a 25-year-old woman enough that we can consider them to be, oh, here are the women and here are how they are voting? I don't think so. But in this case, many times, certain issues get brought forth as issues that are particularly relevant to women, particularly relevant to female voters. In the past, for example, public safety has been one. And I would say it's slightly disingenuous to frame that as a women's issue alone, considering, I think I'm right in saying, in South Korea and most societies, violent death statistically tends to happen to men more often. Now, what I think we see there is not the fact that, oh, we need a candidate to say somebody needs to protect the men. No, that's not that. No, doesn't need to be a men's party looking out for men's physical safety, but that public safety, for example, is an issue that touches everyone, and a society either has a high level of safety or does not. And so sometimes breaking what is actually a problem or a condition that affects everybody into a condition that seems to affect only part of the population is a bit disingenuous. But it's true, nobody is going for the women's vote specifically in this election. That's a fair point, but it's just sort of how this election shaped up, and the issues in play are not necessarily gender charged in a way that's going to decide the election.
And for the sake of comparison, Fabian, what can you tell us about the campaign pledges to promote gender equality in elections elsewhere, like beyond national borders?
Yeah, when I look at Europe, I mean, of course, it's not a unified bloc. I mean, each country is a little bit different, but let me take Germany, for example. Gender topics are quite important, but I think not within the top 3 agenda. I think there's still a big male view on politics, and sometimes also gender topics get, a little bit on the sideline, and that is unfortunate. But yeah, so one comparison is actually that both in Europe and in South Korea, gender topics can be controversial. I mean, in Germany, there's also a big fight for like how to solve the gender pay gap, meaning that women still earn less than men, even though they do the same job. How to promote more women in among CEOs, for example, in the high-level jobs. Do you need a quota or not? That is highly debated. How do you support single mothers, for example? I mean, many of those questions, public safety, etc. But I would say that in general, most European countries are more progressive when it comes to gender topics. That is my opinion. I'm quite shocked when I see that leading presidential candidates here, or especially one in South Korea, can make almost misogynist comments. And I mean, if you say that in Europe, I would say that puts you into the really fringe of the political spectrum. And I think, that being feminist is considered by some of something shameful also. I mean, that is something of a past for most European countries, and I'm quite happy about that.
Right. Fabian, keeping in mind the social challenges faced by women here in South Korea, what would you say is the importance of election pledges aimed at promoting women's welfare in the country?
Yeah, I must say it would be very important, but I'm quite disappointed that it's not on the agenda so much. I mean, first of all, we don't have a female presidential candidate. I mean, South Korea actually, to be fair, had a female president before with Park Geun-hye. I mean, I don't think that her gender played a big role in why she was voted for, but I mean, still, it's an achievement that not many countries have achieved so far. But yeah, this time, for example, when you look at the pledges of the candidates, they usually give out like their 10 most important topics, and then women topics are not featured prominently, and I see mostly one candidate who's talking very openly about it. The others treat it more as a minor topic. I think there's more to be done, because if you look at all the indicators and statistics, I think Korea is still quite a patriarchy, and I think women's rights need to be promoted more. I think there's no equality, I mean, in my personal opinion, so I hope that actually the next president will have that in mind.
Right, fingers crossed for that. Colin, as Fabian mentioned, this particular presidential election, it is the first to see no female contender for the first time in some 18 years. What are your thoughts on the current rate of female women participation in Korean politics?
Yes, it's been how to put it? We've had a stretch here in Korea where there have been female candidates, and suddenly it's surprising to a lot of people that there is not one in the presidential race. Although I myself wonder, I'm not sure how many to expect there to be. In my mind, should I be thinking if there are 8 presidential candidates, should 4 be women? Should 3? Should 2? Should 7 be women? I'm not sure. It's tough to know what the standard should be. In all fields of human endeavor, you're not going to see the population reflected perfectly. That's just the nature of specialization, and I think many women who don't want to participate in Korean politics are perhaps wise not to want to participate in Korean politics. But that aside, yes, it's an election that also happens with the presidency of Park Geun-hye in memory. Of course, as Fabian mentioned, was the first female president of South Korea. And to my mind, I can't vote here in Korea yet. When I get my citizenship, I will. But at that time when she was elected, I would have said that voting for her because she was a woman was not necessarily a bad reason. Because if you bring in the first female president, then you have the sort of mission accomplished, and then the next female candidate does not have the burden of being the first female president or not. The election is not burdened with this idea, are we going to allow in female presidents or aren't we? That's decided. You've had one, and so then that normalizes, shall we say, the next one to come along. But of course, that president was Park Geun-hye, and to many Koreans, that was unfortunate that she was the one to make that mark. And as well, you see these analyses that it could be because of Park Geun-hye's sort of dubious legacy, whether it makes the voters or female politicians themselves a little hesitant about it, that could be in play. And as well, this particular presidential election, was sort of unforeseen. It happened quickly, and the candidate field wasn't necessarily, how to put it, prepared to run for president. And so, how to put it, there are some thoughts that the parties didn't really send their best this time around. It's who could run did run, and perhaps it isn't the right time, especially with parties being in a bit of a state of civil war among themselves. It isn't the right time for a female candidate, but I don't think we've seen the last of female presidential candidates either in Korea.
Right, for sure. Fabian, I'm sure you've been actively covering the election campaign here in the country and the rallies. Beyond the pledges made by the presidential contenders, is there any aspect of the campaigning here in the country that caught your attention?
Yeah, in general, what I do like about South Korean democracy, it is something that you really experience with all your senses. If I compare that to my home country, Germany, politics can feel sometimes a bit dry, but here when it's election season, I mean, you go to the street, you have pickup trucks with, blasting loudspeakers and, blasting the slogans. You go to the conservative demonstrations. As a reporter, you always get a lot of choco pies and like older people who wish you well. Then you go to the leftist NGOs demonstrating, and they are singing guitar songs. And it is, I think it's just a very vivid democracy, and it is something that is also very emotional, a lot of drama. Of course, not without flaws. Sometimes being too emotional also has some drawbacks, but in general, yeah, I do like that. And maybe let me add one thing which caught my attention this time. I would say foreign policy was really not so prominent, and I think that could, in the end, backfire a bit. I think in Korea, sometimes the view is quite introverted, and there's not enough awareness to some degree that, all the conflicts that we have, they are linked, and that they will have also consequences for Korea. So sometimes I wish that also the presidential candidates would have a more clear vision for foreign policy. That is only my opinion. Other than that, I would say compared to the last elections that I covered, that was pre-COVID, I would say this time feels a little less passionate actually than before. But let's see how the voter turnout will be. Now it looks that it could be high, but let's see.
Right, for sure. Colin, young celebrities here in the country often choose to certify, if you will, their exercise of civic duty by sharing or posting pictures online after casting their ballots. Do you suppose this practice in itself serves to perhaps encourage other young voters to partake in their civic duty?
Yes, it couldn't hurt. There is this idea in Korea of the 인증 shot, the shot that proves you've done something, whether you've gone to some place like a fancy cafe, or you've eaten something that's hard to get, or you've done something somewhat notable. You need the 인증 shot to prove it, or you've met somebody famous. So that idea, in some ways, has been ported over, has been transplanted to the democratic process in this case. And of course, there's this idea that if you do something notable, you take a picture of yourself, you take a selfie. And in fact, I was just reading today a book by an American journalist who was talking about voting in the 2016 election and taking her selfie afterward and finding that the church where she voted, in the US, we often vote in places like churches or garage-looking, they're not necessarily picturesque sites. So she went to go find a park and took her photo there, as if she had voted in the park, and her friends called her out on it, like, that doesn't look like a polling place. But they do it in the US too. Here, there's been a bit of a twist on it in this election. Not just posting your selka, but there are these little sheets that have been distributed, or people have been making, with different cartoon characters or jokes or some kind of pun, and a space to put down a stamp when you vote. Looks a little bit like a peace sign, sort of askew, and there's always a place to, it's carefully designed to give you a space, whether it's on the character's face or on a TV they're watching, to stamp there. And then you can take the shot of that, and then you can post it, or hold it up, take a selfie. And it seems like people are having fun with it. As you say, the voting has already begun, and presumably a lot more of that is going to happen next week during the actual election. But I think whether in Korea or in the US, there's a sort of, we're all humans, we are very monkey see, monkey do, and in the case of Korea, social media is an even more powerful force than it is in the United States. And so once you get the voting going on social media, yes, you see your friends doing it, you kind of want to do it too. You want to prove you also did it. You want to post your 인증 shot. But as well, you have the power of celebrity and the power of idols doing it, and there are these sheets, there are special editions being actually distributed by the fan bases of, for example, BTS and their army, the BTS army, although as I've heard, it's actually just BTS army without the article. But in any case, the army has their own sheets, and if some of them do something, the rest want to, and celebrities here have very mobilizable fan bases. So in this case, it's an integration of an old process, voting, although not that old here, with a sort of celebrity culture that's also developed. So I think it is getting out the vote, and I don't think any of us will be surprised by who younger people vote for, voting being very generationally based here. But it is interesting to see that each election, this sort of thing takes a slightly different form. And using pieces of paper seems actually kind of old school. I appreciate it.
Right. Fabian, come June 4th, South Korea will have a new administration taking the top office who will be sharing its economic and hopefully foreign policy agendas, of course. That being said, if you were able to share your humble words of advice to the new administration, what would be your words of advice to the administration as we seek a path forward?
That's a big challenge. I'm not good at giving advice, but I will give some humble words. Yes, what we've seen in the last weeks and months, it was a big challenging time for South Korean democracy. And what I see among especially young peers in Korea, that there has been a slight disillusionment also with democracy. I think the next president has the big task of showing that he's not driven by self-interest, but that he cares about the problems of the common people, which is, of course, a feature that every president should fulfill. But right now, South Korea is really at a turning point. It has achieved so much, but we could see that democracy is precarious. Achievements are not guaranteed forever. We don't only see that in South Korea, but in other Western countries as well. And I really hope that the next president will be successful, because the more successful democratic presidents will be, that will also have a soft power, an attractiveness that goes over beyond South Korea. And I think that is, in those really uncertain times, is very important, also from a global perspective. So I wish the next president well.
Right. All right. That's all the time we have. I'm sure hopefully they'll take your words into consideration after June 4th or on June 4th. Fabian, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. And Colin, as always, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right. On that note, we end this week's editions of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend.